The interrogation room door slid silently shut. Detective N knew better than to make loud noises around detainees. They were clearly missing a few marbles. He took a seat across from the handcuffed man at the table, watching his body language.
So, you know?
Yes, sir, I am.
Well, I'm Detective N. Mind telling me what brought you to the Glenmont Metro today?
Sure. I had just gotten off work, and I was gonna catch the line to Wheaton. I work as a security guard here in Glenmont, and...
Okay, I get it. So, what about the guy you tried to shoot in the head? We couldn't turn up any connections between you two. Lived on opposite sides of the city, no apparent opportunities to interact, no work history. What are we missing?
Nothing. I never met, what was his name?
Pete.
Yeah, Pete. Anyway, I read what he wrote, and I felt so bad for him. I just wanted to help.
Help him. By painting the subway station with his brains.
I know how crazy that sounds, but I'm guessing you haven't read what he...
Oh, I read his little post. Well, skimmed it. Look, I'm sure you had good intentions, but we have to put together a picture of what happened. Need to know why you were there in your own words, that's all.
So, you believe me? I really was just trying to help.
I mean, he certainly had an abnormal experience. Experimental drugs, altered states, hallucinations. Voices spoke to me. They sung to me in languages that never existed. Clearly, anyone who'd write something like this needs help. So, just tell me how exactly you plan to help him.
What? No, we're wasting time. Pete needs to die, fast. Just give me back my gun and let me go and I can go.
Whoa. I want to help him too, but there's a procedure. A right way to do it. Look, just give me your side of the story, and then we'll figure out how to help. Okay?
Fine. We need to be quick, though.
Nothing would make me happier.
The detective set pen to paper and began taking notes. I guess there's only one place to start. The post that Pete wrote. If you're armed at the Glenmont Metro, please shoot me.
If I were unexpectedly forced to spend millions of years in a subway station, I'd want to make sure that I'm not unnecessarily weighed down. That's where today's sponsor, Exter, comes in. Exter produces high-quality, everyday carry items such as wallets, bags, and other accessories that help you make the most of each day. For example, this is the Exter Cardholder Pro, an RFID blocking, lightweight aluminum wallet to keep your cards and cash organized. My favorite feature about it is this right here, the quick release trigger. With just a press, my cards are visible and accessible. I went with this carbon forged finish on mine and added a tracker card that slips in right here beneath the back plate. The tracking card's low profile also makes it perfect for bags such as Exter's Grid backpack or their travel pack vacuum kit. Best of all, Exter is currently running an anniversary sale through the 31st of March. So if any of this sounds good to you, check out Exter right now at partner.exter.com/curmudgeon to get up to 40% off your order. Thanks so much to Exter for sponsoring this video. Now, let's return to, if you're armed and at the Glenmont Metro, please shoot me.
He started out with some pretty clear directions for whoever read it. A headshot to the temple, aiming slightly downwards. Pete acted like it was pretty urgent. Said that it needed to be the shortest distance between his skull and his hippocampus so that he wouldn't feel the bullet for too long. I had no idea what that meant, but then I kept reading. Pete says that this morning, about 10:15 or so, he participated in some study to test if a new pill had any nasty side effects. This sort of experiment wasn't anything new for him, just something he does on the side to earn some extra scratch. But this time was different. Normally, he never felt anything from the drugs he took, but this one hit him hard. He says that he took the pill at 10:15, then the doc sent him to the lobby to wait for the pill to kick in before further testing. You'd expect it to take a while for the pill to start working, but whatever they gave him started working right away. Maybe that should have been a sign that things were gonna get worse. He only waited a quarter hour, but Pete managed to read 30 chapters of Moby Dick before they came back for him. It was like time was moving slower, or more accurately, his brain was moving faster. The doctors explained that the drug he'd been given was designed to induce a state of accelerated brain function. They ran him through a series of physical and mental tests, stuff like juggling and word searches, and Pete blew away their expectations like a superhero.
A juggling superhero. I don't know. Doesn't seem too useful to me.
It's not about the juggling. You've never felt like your days are too short? Never felt like the time you've been given on this earth isn't enough? I can see the appeal, but there's also such a thing as too much time, right? The detective briefly glanced at the detainee, made eye contact, then continued to scratch down notes without a word. So the researchers encouraged Pete to go home and make good use of the effect. They assured him that it'd wear off in a few hours and sent him on his way. Thing is, those hours felt like days to Pete. At first it was fine, kind of fun even, since he was relearning how to move around with his body stuck in slow motion. But then he took the Metro home and it was just this unbearable crawl. And that's when you tried to shoot him. No, at that point he was fine. Pete didn't need help yet, or at least he didn't know that he did. He just went home, read a few stuffy books, and decided it'd be better to sleep off the effects of the drug. Walking to his bedroom took what felt like 45 minutes, and even once he got to bed, his body wasn't tired enough to fall asleep. So, he popped an Ambien.
Mixing substances, always a good idea.
I doubt that he expected things to turn out as bad as they did.
So, how do you end up back in the Metro?
Well, in the moment, the Ambien didn't do anything. Things were still happening slower, and he still couldn't sleep, so he decided that his best bet was to head back to the office where they'd done the test, see if they could do anything for him. He never made it there, but thank goodness he tried. Who knows how long it would have taken for help to arrive if he'd been locked up at home. Probably a few hours, at least. For us, anyway.
Help? You mean for someone to come shoot him?
Yeah. I'm not sure what else anyone could do for him. There's no time to think of alternatives. At that, the detective scrawled down a hasty series of notes. So, can I continue? Please do. Let's see. So, Pete made his way back to the station. Another half-hour walk turned into a multi-day journey in his mind, but just when he was making his way back down into the Metro, the Ambien finally hit, and everything just stopped.
Stopped?
Yeah, like froze. Like being in a picture, only not exactly that.
The trial pill wasn't even the thing that wrecked him? It was the Ambien? So, everything that happened was his fault?
Well, sorta. Time was already screwy beforehand, so I don't know. I think something about the Ambien didn't play nice with what the researchers gave Pete this morning.
But it was avoidable. Maybe it would have taken a long time to wear off, but it wouldn't have just stopped.
You're probably right, but it wasn't completely still, just it was so slow you'd think it was all still. Once the drugs had a chance to mingle, even seconds felt like days, and even though his mind was moving faster than ever, his body was basically impossible to control. He was headed down a flight of stairs when he ended up rolling his ankle before tumbling the rest of the way down the steps and dislocating his shoulder. You ever popped out your shoulder? I have. Can't even imagine feeling that for a couple days without being able to do anything about it. For Pete, it lasted weeks, years even, but that wasn't nearly the worst of it. By the time he'd hit the ground, he'd already given up on living, just wanted to crawl to the platform, hoping to get himself in front of the next train, which was a few years out for him. Not a particularly pleasant death, but it was all he could think of.
But he never got that far.
Nope. The Ambien wasn't done with him, turns out. Instead, while he was pulling himself through the station, things were just getting slower and slower. He managed to get himself under the bench where I found him, but by then, every second lasted decades. He'd blink and there'd be darkness for years and years with nothing but the pain to keep him company. That's when it got really weird. Since his brain was working so fast, it got to work filling in the space where sight and sound should have been. He started hearing things, seeing things. He imagined entire lifetimes that no one really lived, like a little deity, hunched under a bench in the subway, making up worlds in his own mind.
That doesn't sound so bad.
Really? What about the 5th universe you've dreamt up? The 20th? 100th? It's gotta get old eventually, no matter what it is. And it did.
Hence the post.
Right. Pete called it his Plan B, a call for help, in case someone who could shoot him in the head came along sooner than the train.
So you just wanted to put him out of his misery?
Exactly. Honestly, I was just on my phone to pass the time while I waited for the train when I saw the post. When I started reading it, I obviously didn't believe any of it, but I looked around and I could see Pete from where I was standing. I mean, it was pretty surreal, like randomly seeing your house on TV or something. But then I started thinking, could it really be random? What realistically are the chances that I would be there with a gun right as this guy was posting this? What if he really needed help? What if it's like fate or something? Then I started thinking about the stakes, and I realized if this guy is for real, every second I hesitate means years of suffering for him. If I had just walked away, it would have haunted me, I think. I'm not the brightest, and people have always had an easy time pulling tricks on me, but my gun was in my hand before I even realized it. Someone must have seen what I was about to do, and that's when I got tackled. I'm ashamed I wasn't able to do more to help Pete.
So you really do believe him then?
I do. But I think I'd have tried to shoot him even if I didn't. I'm used to being wrong, but playing it safe.
Playing it safe, right. See, I'm not as convinced as you. It seems to me that if someone were in this situation, they wouldn't write something so wordy. Cut out the fluff, the backstory. If you want help, ask for it.
I thought about that, but then if he's really had so much time to think about it, wouldn't he know better than us? Wouldn't he know how best to ask? I mean, it worked. I tried. If someone better than me had come along, maybe they wouldn't have screwed it up. But it's not too late. If you got everything you need, we can head back to the station and...
No need. The boys found Pete and rushed him to the emergency room right after we cleared the station. I'm sure he's receiving care as we speak. If it makes you feel better, you really did help him. If you hadn't pulled a gun on him, no one would have noticed a druggie throwing himself in front of the train till it was too late. Now he can get the help he really needs from professionals.
What? You mean they're keeping him alive? I thought you wanted to help him. You never believed me?
I do want to help Pete, just like I want to help you. I shouldn't need to tell you this, but Pete wasn't well. Whatever he wrote, you don't just kill someone because they ask you to. Doesn't matter if it's chance or fate or some higher power telling you to pull the trigger.
But what if he's right?
He's not. Just high out of his mind. Once he comes down, he'll be a very rich man. Whatever he took clearly wasn't ready for human trials, and probably wasn't even legal. He's got a good case.
But if you're wrong, keeping him alive is like, it's a living hell. Even bumps and bruises add up when all those little aches last for hundreds of years.
I feel bad for him. I really do. But if you're willing to get his blood on your hands over a hunch like this, that says more about you than him.
No, you don't get it. Think about it. By the time he posted his message to us, he'd been there for at least 10,000 years. But I didn't find him right away. Who knows how long he's been trapped in his own head? He's already gone through more than anyone else in human history, maybe more than all of us put together. Not killing him might be the most evil thing anyone's ever done. Millions of years of human suffering because of inaction. Even if it does wear off after 1,000,000 years, then what? What does this world have to offer someone who's created and destroyed 100 worlds? What does this life have to offer somebody who's lived 1,000 lives? Just because you flush it out of his system doesn't mean you saved him. I tried to give him the one thing he hasn't experienced over and over again. Death. If you want to help him, that's the only way to do it.
Look, at this point, I've got all I need. I appreciate your cooperation. Most people would have asked for a lawyer by this point, but you seem like a good kid. I hope you'll get the help you need.
Left alone with humming lights, the detainee soaked in the near silence of the interrogation room. All he could think was that he never should have tried to shoot Pete. If he hadn't, at least he might have made it in front of the train. The story of the Glenmont Metro deals with one of my favorite topics in all of horror, the fear of the infinite. While Pete's experiences are technically finite, the horror of the story arises from the madness of living too long and experiencing too much, and all the while, the reader is haunted by a single question. What if it never ends? This is only the beginning of the story of the Glenmont Metro. There are a couple of other stories that tie into it. One titled, My Daughter Wants to Eat a Woman Who Shares Her Birthday, and another story that ties everything together called, My Patient Spent 8 million years under a bench in the Glenmont Metro. These follow-ups give more answers about Subject 47, whom I called Pete, as well as the drug that he was given. If you're interested in hearing more about this universe, let me know. I'd be happy to explore the rest of the narrative with you in the coming months. The way the Glenmont Metro is written really helps to sell the sense of time slowing down. All in all, it's not a particularly long story. However, the constant references to time frames and shifts in focus over the course of the story help us to empathize with the experience Pete is having, even if we could never fully comprehend it. At first, we get fewer details. Pete's time in the waiting room, his performance on the physical and mental tests in the office, and his trip home are primarily described only at a high level, but it doesn't stay that way. Once he gets home, descriptions become progressively more granular, and moments that would be insignificant in any other story are instead treated as major events. Even something as unnoticeable as a blink becomes important when things are moving so slowly. Entire chapters of Pete's life are dedicated to typing single letters in his message to us. In that, the post, which was written over the span of thousands, if not millions of years, is also the greatest work of human dedication ever undertaken. A compliment to the suffering that Pete faced in his brief, endless existence. This story is, in many ways, very similar to others that I've covered in the past, such as Long Dream by Junji Ito, The Jaunt by Stephen King, and My House.wad. These stories thrive on subverting our natural fear of death, instead asking if there might be something worse than passing quietly into oblivion or paradise. However, while those stories draw their fear from a similar place, one thing that sets this story apart is that it's much less abstract, and I think that really works in its favor. For example, whereas The Jaunt sees its victims lost in an endless experience of nothingness, this story's protagonist is instead trapped in his own body. He has experiences, sure, but they're completely mundane. Decades of darkness in every blink, centuries fixated on the same mind-numbing advertisements, millennia of the same drifting, staring, judgmental faces. At some point, these staples of the environment become so monotonous that they may as well be non-existent. Likewise, Junji Ito's Long Dream saw its protagonist locked in ever-lengthening dreams and nightmares. There's plenty of fear in that, certainly, but at least it wouldn't have been so dreadfully boring. Pete's fate is a uniquely horrifying one, a hell in which his perspective is transformed into his prison. It's this concept that most closely reminds me of another story, Johnny Got His Gun, in which a soldier from World War I is injured by a bomb that robs him of his arms, legs, and face. Ultimately, his life is saved, but he loses all of his senses besides touch, and even that is bombarded with constant, overwhelming pain. He eventually discovers a way to communicate with those around him, using his head to slam Morse code onto his pillow, asking to die. But his request is denied on moral grounds. It's a notoriously dark book, particularly because of how grounded its premise is, and I think its inspiration on If You're Armed at the Glenmont Metro is abundantly clear. In the future, I'd love to cover more stories and projects like this, so consider this the second entry in a series all about stories that involve the fear of the infinite. There's plenty of them out there. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, The Stanley Parable, A Brief Stay in Hell, and many more, I'm sure. So, let me know your suggestions for this series in the comments. And remember, all good things come to an end, but the very worst things last forever. I'm Curmudgeon. Thanks for watching.